Thank you so much for inviting me and giving a lecture presentation on PraisU. I just saw, Andre, that you already showed some slide on PraisU, and I will start a little bit with the beginning, actually, how we came to PraisU and what we are currently doing. So thank you for listening to my presentation. So this is a short overview of actually a little bit of history. And as you can see, we started our adventure in 1980 when we learned that a lot of people that were diagnosed with prostate cancer actually died from prostate cancer. Sorry. And you see that in 1993, we started the first randomized controlled screening trials, the PLCO in the US and the ERSPC in Europe. And then there's a long gap of time between 1993 and 2009 when we first published our results from ERSPC and PLCO, which were contradictory. But luckily in 2016 there was some clarity, and I think we can safely conclude that population-based screening organized in a program can reduce suffering and dying from prostate cancer. So that is a little bit the basis on where our work currently is all about. So what did we do in ERSPC? Well, it's a very simple algorithm. You see, you take a PSA test, and if it's elevated, you perform a systematic biopsy, and this is something you repeat with a fixed interval. The pros are that there is not much extra risk stratification tools acquired. It resulted in many unnecessary biopsy procedures, overdiagnosis of approximately 50%, and potential undersampling. And the examples, like I said, were ERSPC and PLCO. This changed, obviously, when the MRI was there, and this was positions between the PSA test and the biopsy. There was suddenly now the MRI available, which resulted in improved sampling, no risk stratification still, less overdiagnosis, but still in a population-based setting, up to 70% unnecessary MRIs, which is something we need to take into account with availability issues and costs. And also many men with PIRATES 3, which is a little bit the gray zone, were biopsied unnecessary. Examples, the Göteborg trial and the PROBASE trial. So what we could do is then perform a risk stratification step before MRI to avoid unnecessary biopsies in men with an elevated PSA because of BPH. Still, the pros are there, obviously. We can reduction of unnecessary MRIs, improved sampling remains. We have still unnecessary biopsies in PIRATES 3, and with each risk stratification step we do, we must be aware that we will miss some clinically significant prostate cancer. The question is always, how bad is that if you have a repeat screening program with intervals? Examples, the ProScreen trial in Finland and the Stockholm 3 MRI trial in Sweden. So what we then could do, and that is the final step, is a double risk stratification. We do a risk stratification after PSA and also after MRI. And the whole focus here is on avoiding harm and costs, obviously, but we need to take into account that with this strategy we might miss clinically significant prostate cancer, so we have to be very aware about the consequences and what to detect. And this is actually the example of the PraisU pilots, and I come to that in a minute. The first question we need to ask is prostate cancer screening still having an effect on prostate cancer mortality, and does it remain so? And this is the latest publication of the ERSPC study with 23 years of follow-up now, a median of 23 years of follow-up. And what we see is, yes, the mortality reduction is something that stays. It is still there. The absolute mortality reduction is still increasing after such a long period. The effect is still increasing. The number needed to avoid one man dying from prostate cancer is currently 456. And when we started, it was 1,400. And the number they need to diagnose, so extra diagnosis to avoid one man dying from prostate cancer, is currently 12, which was 48 with the first report. However, and there's always an however, with this one-size-fits-all strategy, we detected a lot of low-risk prostate cancer, and many men were biopsied multiple times while there was no cancer or significant cancer detected. So the effect is still very strong. It's still there after such a long period, but we need to do something about the harms, obviously. So in conclusion, a sustained reduction in deaths from prostate cancer. The harm-benefit ratio is improved, for sure, but future strategies must minimize overdiagnosis, but keeping the benefits, obviously, that's important. So this is what happened at the latest years. We gave recommendations. The EU came with the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, and there was an update on the recommendations of cancer screening with the recommendation to start exploring the possibilities to screen for prostate cancer. And this is where PRAISE-U came into place, and we started in 2023. So PRAISE-U, short for Prostate Cancer Awareness and Initiative for Screening in the European Union. And what is it all about? It is a very large consortium with 20 beneficiaries, 5 partners. It started on April the 1st in 2023. And it will last for 3 years, so we are coming to an end of PRAISE-U next year. Here you see all the partners in PRAISE-U, many stakeholders from many different disciplines. So not only urology, but certainly also epidemiologists, GPs are involved, cost-effective analysis, all kinds of people are involved in this large consortium, and we try to get a good picture of population-based screening for prostate cancer. I think you saw these slides just before. This is the plan of PRAISE-U. In year 1, we worked very hard to get a knowledge base, to get a needs assessment of all EU member states, and to get a state of play report. In year 2, we rolled out the pilot studies. I will come back to that in a minute. And currently, we are in the phase of actually doing the evaluation of PRAISE-U. So first, a living knowledge platform, a needs assessment, and a state of play report. This is what we did, and I think Andre just showed you. This resulted in a lot of systematic reviews and a lot of information about prostate cancer in Europe. Very educational material, very interesting material, and you can look it up at our dedicated website of PRAISE-U under EuroWeb. If we then come to the Living Knowledge Hub, where you can find everything that we did, there is data visualization, there are fact sheets listed, and I think something is missing here. Yes, there's the map of Europe. You can click on a country on the map of Europe, and you can learn everything about this particular country with respect to prostate cancer and prostate cancer detection. And here I listed the Czech Republic, obviously, and I want to thank, obviously, Andre and his group to provide all this information and to work with on the interactive knowledge hub of PRAISE-U. Here you can see that we have fact sheets of every country. You can download them from the internet, and you can learn of every country within the EU. What is the state of play with respect to prostate cancer screening? And I invite you to have a look here because it's very educational. Now the pilots. The pilots have started in year 2 of PRAISE-U. They require obviously a lot of work before you can actually start a pilot, but we have 5 pilots up and running in PRAISE-U. 1 in Ireland, 2 in Spain, in Galicia and Manresa, 1 in Poland and 1 in Lithuania. And we learn a lot from countries like Sweden and Estonia because they have screening programs up and running. So the pilots are supposed to run for exactly 1 year, and they focus obviously on feasibility, not on looking whether prostate cancer mortality is reduced, obviously within 1 year. You cannot look at that, but on feasibility within the national healthcare structure. This is, like I just told you, the algorithm of PRAISE-U, where we recommend, and it's a recommendation, obviously, a double risk stratification. So after PSA, we perform a first risk stratification before we move on to MRI. And after MRI, in those men with a PIRATES 3, which are a little bit the unsecure results, we perform another risk stratification. And all this is done with the goal to avoid unnecessary testing and to be able to implement such an algorithm within the existing healthcare infrastructure. At the bottom of this slide, you can see that we collect a lot of patient-reported outcomes of men participating in such a screening program. This algorithm is obviously that we recommend, and each center can use it as long as it fits into their healthcare system. And here you see the different characteristics of the 5 pilot studies currently working within PRAISE-U, the 2 Spanish pilot sites, Manresa, Galicia, the pilot site in Ireland, in Poland, and Lithuania. And you see that there are some distinct differences. For instance, Ireland uses a PSA home-based kit, so that men do not have to come for blood drawing. They can test their PSA more or less at home. And the risk stratification is done in several ways, where Manresa uses PSA density as a risk stratification step. And also you see differences in the MRI and the type of biopsy that is done. All this is because it has to fit within the national healthcare structure, because otherwise it will not work. Risk stratification, just focus on that. 4 sites use the Rotterdam Prostate Cancer Risk Calculator. And if you are not aware what that exactly is, I would invite you to look at this website or an app. There's also an app. And what the risk calculator actually does is also more or less using PSA density and some other features to calculate a man's individual risk of having prostate cancer. So that's what we use to avoid that men with a high PSA level because of BPH are constantly biopsied every visit over and over again. We are currently in the phase of evaluation and obviously thinking about sustainability of these projects, these pilot projects. What are we going to evaluate within PRAISE-U? And as you can see here, we will do clinical evaluation. This will focus obviously on the algorithm that I just showed, number of MRIs, type of cancers that are being detected, compliance, type of Gleason scores, everything you can imagine will be evaluated within the clinical part. But there is also a psychosocial part and a cost-effectiveness part, obviously, in these pilots. The clinical evaluation will be done according to the PRAISE-U database, which contains all data at a participant level, and we will focus on all the steps of the algorithm. The psychosocial evaluation will focus on the participants' attitudes and the stakeholders' attitudes. And you can see that we will use all the questionnaires that we have collected along the algorithm in men that participated in the screening program. And for the stakeholder attitude, we have focus groups interviews with all the people that are actually involved in conducting a pilot study, a population-based prostate cancer screening pilot study. Cost effectiveness will be done with a decision analytical model to predict the costs of the intervention within each of the pilot countries. We will need data to do that from cancer registries and also data from participant level. So some preliminary results which are still confidential. So I would appreciate if you do not take pictures anymore, because I saw some mobile phones popping up in my screen. So please avoid taking pictures of these results. Here you can see the number of invitations and the participation rate, which is still preliminary. We are not done completely, so do not pin us on these numbers. It's just for your information that you can see that the participation rates varies enormously between countries. And obviously we are going to look into detail on what is driving this. Here you can see the PSA distribution, heavily dependent obviously on the age distribution, but those are more or less comparable. And what you can see that approximately 10 to 16% of the men that are responding to the invitation have a PSA above 3, and those are the men that are being referred for further assessment. And here you see the result of a risk stratification step, which is important. So of all the men with a PSA of 3 or higher, you can see that with an additional risk stratification step, we avoid 20 to up to 60% of referrals for MRI. And this is important information if you think about screening millions of men for prostate cancer. And obviously we are going to look about the long-term effects of avoiding these MRIs with repeat screening. This is important. So what is happening with all this data? And I think that Andre already mentioned EU CanScreen. We now have PRAISE-U with pilot studies in 4 different countries, and we have knowledge-sharing countries. We now have EU CanScreen, which started somewhat more than a year ago, where also many countries have initiated prostate cancer screening pilot studies, and we will bring all these data together in a large evidence hub where we can learn from all the countries about population-based prostate cancer screening. And this is then the map. If we look now, and this map is totally different from the map, let's say, 5 years ago, when there was hardly any initiative apart perhaps from Lithuania and Sweden with respect to population-based prostate cancer screening studies. And now we see a lot of activities throughout Europe, either in the form of a randomized controlled trial or a population-based program like in Sweden, but lots of countries considering or already started pilots of prostate cancer screening. So there's a lot of things happening in Europe with respect to prostate cancer screening. And I think it's crucial that we bring all this knowledge together and learn from each other how to initiate a population-based program, because I think that is really important. And with that, I would like to end my presentation and thank you for listening. And this is the PRAISE-U Consortium, which hopefully within the coming 3 years will continue with a follow-up program, obviously depending on funding from the EU. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Monique, for this excellent overview. And I will now ask for a question, but I will also open the discussion in Czech. Takže dámy a pánové, prezentace byla v angličtině, my jsme se pokusili poskytnout ten orientační překlad AI, který samozřejmě občas nebyl úplně přesný. Pokud máte jakýkoliv dotaz na paní profesorku Roobol, tak prosím nyní klidně v češtině, pokud budete chtít, a my ji pak přeložíme. Tak poprosím o dotaz.
Já tady zkusím v češtině. Já bych jenom dodal, že loni jsem se zúčastnil Cancer Summit v Bruselu a tam byla sekce prostaty, screeningu prostaty a spolu s profesorem Van Poppelem jsme právě tam uváděli zkušenost z České republiky. Já jsem měl podobnou prezentaci taky na regionálních konferencích v Zágrebu a v Rize, které byly věnovány širšímu tedy portfoliu rakoviny.
Thank you. Dr. Kulka mentioned that they actually also appreciated sharing this experience on the European level, and he was able to share ours and appreciated that Professor Van Poppel at the last European Cancer Summit also shared this information. So this is very valuable.
That was the presentation from the perspective of patient organizations, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, Monique. Here's Roman Zachoval speaking. Thank you very much for your presentation and presenting the results of the PROSTAFORUM project. We started January last year here in Czech Republic, and we tried to create really perfect methodology of the project. Anyway, during the project, we are facing some problems. They didn't show up at the beginning. And one of these problems are, for example, approach to some specific group of men, like men with some genetic load, men treated with inhibitors of 5-alpha reductase and so on. And we don't have an approach to them at the moment. So my question to you is if you also met the problems like this in other countries, and if you prepare some recommendation for this specific group of patients.
Thank you. Yes, obviously this is, in my view, one of the most important issues with prostate cancer screening, and that is the response to the invitation to participate in screening. We know from the WHO that actually if a screening program, if a cancer screening program has to be effective, that around 70% of the men that are invited actually should come. For prostate cancer, this will be the major challenge, right? Because we don't get the 70%, far from that actually. Currently, we are very lucky if we get 45% of men actually responding to the invitation. So what we are currently doing, and like I just said, we sincerely hope that we can continue with PROSTAFORUM and in the form of PROSTAFORUM Plus, so another PROSTAFORUM program, and there a special attention will be on how to reach those underserved men, as we call them. So these are the groups of men that do not respond to invitations for cancer screening or for any screening. So what we're going to do is work very hard with experts on trying to find out in what way we can communicate with these men. We know, for instance, that in the UK, men are approached to healthcare workers that live in the neighborhoods. They go to facilities in the neighborhoods where people come to drink a cup of coffee or something which is trustworthy, which is known, and they talk to the men. So that's a lot of effort to reach out to men that normally do not come. We are in one of the pilots in Poland, we go out, for instance, with a bus. So the bus is being announced in the neighborhood, in the local newspapers, that the screening bus is coming on a Saturday. And then the men can go to this bus and have their blood drawn, because they do not respond to a written letter, an invitation letter, and do not come to a localization where they can have their blood drawn. So we are working on a lot of methods with movies, with interactive videos, with SMS, with calling actually men, calling them to be able to participate. But I do not have the answer for you on how we can tackle this. This is extremely difficult. And one of the major challenges for especially prostate cancer screening, because we know that breast cancer screening, for instance, lung cancer screening and colorectal cancer screening do not have this. They have this problem, but it is not as big as in prostate cancer screening. And unfortunately, I have to say, and I hope I do not offend many men now, but the problem is that these men are in general very reluctant to participate. So we have to convince them to do so. I think that especially high-risk groups, like you mentioned, with a genetic burden, can hopefully be picked up in a different special program, because population-based screening is there for all men and not in a particularly high-risk group. We want to tackle them, but most likely they need to be invited a little bit sooner than the normal population. And we also know that men with very low income, bad health literacy, from low socioeconomic status, those are the men we want to find. And those are the men we need to screen, because we just shown in ERSPC that those are the men that have the highest risk of dying from prostate cancer. But it is a major challenge, I do agree. And we're working very hard on it, actually. We have to, yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments and information, interesting information, how it works in other countries.
Yeah.
And concerning this specific group of men, we are of the same opinion. So we probably exclude these men out from the program. So let's work on it together further on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, if there are no questions for the audience, I may have probably last question for you. And I understand it's probably a bit difficult, but for example, Czech screening is now prepared. The pilot program is now for 5 years, and we are seeing new studies coming regarding, for example, the risk stratification or new multi-cancer detection tests and stuff. Can you somehow think about how the program how the recommended model may look like in, let's say, 5 years, or at least what are the trends we should pay attention to when it comes to the prostate screening?
Thank you. Difficult question, Andre, obviously. What I do think is that I do not know how the future looks, but I am convinced of one thing. There will be no European algorithm, right? It will be it has to fit for every separate country. And that is what I learned from PRAISE-U. You cannot suggest, okay, you have to do this or you have to do that, because if it doesn't fit in the healthcare structure, in the cultural structure of the country, or simply there are no researchers or facilitations to do so, then it won't ever fly. So what we have to do, we have to be practical. And there is one thing I would really like to stress, and that is because of the data that are currently there, if we're talking about true population-based screening, where men are invited to a program and have to participate, to this program. So they are not a selected population that comes first through a GP or through a urologist, but truly population-based screening. You have to apply risk stratification, because otherwise you will spend so many of your resources for unnecessary testing, unnecessary imaging and biopsies, and you will lose participation in the end. And especially a rescreening will be crucial. We have learned that a one-time screening will not do the job. So we have to keep these men on board, and you can keep these men on board. It is already very difficult to get them on board, but if you have them on board, you can only keep them on board if you do not do unnecessary testing and interventions, because otherwise you will lose them at all. So I am a wholly believer in risk stratification, which will be challenging because up to now, most of the population-based cancer screening programs are a one-size-fits-all program. So we are front runners in this respect. But I do think that it is for prostate cancer screening, having the PSA test as the initial test, which is a perfect test in my view for this purpose, we have to apply risk stratification. So I am not in favor of one or another method, as long as it does the job, reduce unnecessary referrals, and fits in the national health structure. So two items are crucial in my view. One is getting men to participate, which is the major challenge for us, and then test only those men that really need to be tested, because otherwise the program will become impossible to do, actually. So I leave it like this, Andre. I hope it's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank
any
you.
More question? Yes, please.
I have one question. I still think about it whole time here while sitting here. I am a radiologist, not urologist, okay, in screening of prostate cancer for last 2 years, but I'm still thinking we have so many great things how to make screening. Are there any researches in European Union how to make primary prevention, not to even come into this state that you have prostate cancer? Is there anything like that?
There have been many, many attempts, right, for primary prevention.
Because this is for me the basic,
yeah.
and I don't hear anything about it, and I would be really, very happy for that.
Yeah, but I don't think it will work in prostate cancer. Sorry. We had many trials, and there isn't anything that is so particularly linked to prostate cancer that you can conduct primary prevention. Different for lung cancer, obviously. That helps a lot if you don't smoke, also for other cancers, but for prostate cancers, it is too difficult. So I think for prostate cancer, we are stuck with secondary prevention, unfortunately.
So this is the only option now, what we have. And are there any researchers?
For now,
yeah,
for now.
Yeah. So, but they will work on it?
Of course they are, but there's constant research going on, obviously. And I must say, there's a lot of work actually going on in men that have been diagnosed with a low-risk prostate cancer. They are, in general, put on active surveillance, so they're not treated, but they're followed actively. And those men actually can have a lot of benefit in healthy food and healthy living and so on. There's a lot of research going on into that, because these men, they are cancer patients, and they need to do something about their cancer, right? They are not treated because it's not necessary most of the time, but just doing nothing feels also very strange. And especially in those men, there are programs, at least in the Netherlands, a lot of programs where you can work on healthy food, exercise and so on, to keep your, let's say, your condition up to a good level, and that will help you to battle psychological to battle the cancer. Yeah, so that is a lot of work is being done on that. But
so we can
real primary prevention, no, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, there is no primary prevention for prostate cancer at the moment.
But I'm not sure. I think we just don't use it in Czech Republic.
I'm sure. But every day in our urological offices, we meet quite many patients with prostate cancer, diagnosed prostate cancer, and they wonder why they have a prostate cancer, because they run 20 kilometers a day and eat only tomatoes. But that's why we need this secondary prevention, which is the prostate cancer screening. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yep.
Thank you very much for this also very important discussion. And if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you for the discussion and thank you very much for accepting the invitation. Thank you very much, Monique, and I hope to see you soon.
You will. Don't worry. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye all and have a great day together.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye-bye.